Hi, I'm Chloe Miller. I'm 29, and I honestly thought my family was close, like really close. We had our quirks, sure, every family does, but I truly believed we had an unbreakable bond built on mutual respect and love. That is, until one perfectly sunny Sunday, at what should have been a relaxing, familiar brunch, when my entire world flipped upside down. It wasn't just a disagreement. It was an earthquake that fractured everything I thought I knew about us. You know that feeling, don't you? That gut-wrenching sensation when someone, especially someone you love and trust, treats your most profound achievements, your deepest passions, and your hardest-won victories like they mean absolutely nothing? Like the years of relentless effort, of blood, sweat, and tears, the sheer, unadulterated passion you poured into creating something truly yours can just be casually gifted away? Not because it's for a greater good or because you've made a mistake, but simply because. Well, because you're not the favorite child. Because your value in their eyes is less. Because what you've built, what you've earned, is simply seen as a resource to be allocated to someone else, someone they deem more deserving or perhaps more needy. It all started so innocently. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the sweet scent of maple syrup. Crispy, golden waffles piled high. A pitcher of cold, vibrant orange juice glistening in the morning light. The usual Sunday morning chatter, light and easy. And then, without warning, the bomb dropped. Just one impossible demand, delivered with a casualness that felt utterly, sickeningly condescending. Chloe, give your land to your sister. It's what's best for the family. My land. The land I'd painstakingly saved for, dreamed about, and finally made mine. The one thing that truly felt like an extension of my soul, my independence, my future. Just give it away, for the family. For my sister. And when I refused? When I dared to assert my own agency, my own boundaries, my own ownership? My father, the man who was supposed to protect me, to guide me, to celebrate my triumphs, turned it into a war. A brutal, relentless, emotional war that I never, in my wildest nightmares, saw coming. It wasn't just a disagreement. It was a campaign to break me, to force me to conform, to sacrifice my identity for their convenience. Have you ever found yourself in that impossible position? Having to fight your own family, the very people who are supposed to be your safe harbor, to protect what is rightfully yours? To defend your very existence, your choices, your dreams, against the people who are supposed to champion them? Tell me in the comments below. I want to hear your stories, because I know I can't be the only one who's faced this kind of betrayal. And hey, if you appreciate stories that truly cut deep, stories of resilience, of fighting for what's right, even when it feels like the whole world, especially your world, is a guy. NSTU, then make sure to hit that like button and definitely subscribe. Because trust me, you haven't heard anything yet. This is just the beginning. No, before everything blew up, before that fateful Sunday brunch, there was a time I felt like I was truly building something for myself. Something solid, something real, and that something was 17 acres of untouched, wooded land in rural Tennessee. To most people, it might have just looked like a patch of trees, maybe a bit overgrown. But to me, it was my slice of heaven. It was freedom. It was independence. It was a tangible representation of every late night, every extra shift, every sacrifice I'd made over the years. I'd always dreamed of having my own space, a place where I could breathe, create, and just be. Growing up, our house always felt full. Not just with people, but with expectations, with a certain kind of energy that never quite aligned with my own. I craved quiet, nature, the ability to build a life on my own terms. So from the moment I graduated college, I had a singular focus. Save every penny I could. It wasn't easy, not by a long shot. I worked 2 jobs consistently, a full-time marketing gig during the day, and then bartending a few nights a week. Weekends were spent freelancing or picking up odd jobs. And let's not forget the student loans, a constant shadow reminding me of the debt I was chipping away at. There were times I was so exhausted. I thought about giving up, about settling for something less. But then I'd close my eyes and picture it. The rustling leaves, the clear sky, the quiet hum of the wilderness. That vision kept me going. Friends would spend their extra cash on trendy vacations or new cars. Not me. Every bonus, every tax return, Every extra dollar went into a separate savings account, labeled simply Land Fund. It was a secret obsession, one I didn't share much about, especially not with my parents. Why? Because honestly, they never truly seemed to take my dreams seriously. When I'd vaguely mentioned wanting to buy land someday, their response was usually a dismissive wave of the hand or a comment about how impractical it was. They'd talk about how much money I was wasting on a rustic fantasy instead of living a normal life, which to them meant being close by and adhering to their idea of success. They viewed my desire for independence as eccentric, almost selfish. They didn't understand that for me, this wasn't about escaping them. It was about building my own foundation, creating something authentic and deeply personal. So when the time finally came, when I'd saved enough for a down payment and found this perfect 70-acre parcel, I opted for a smaller, more manageable 17 acres, knowing I could always expand later. I felt an incredible surge of accomplishment. It was wild, untouched, serene. Future home, future garden, future sanctuary, it was all there, waiting to be brought to life. I pictured myself there, surrounded, dead by nature, finally at peace. It was my hard-earned haven, a dream etched into every tree and every patch of dirt. It was everything. And it was mine. Unquestionably. Or so I thought. My land. My 17 acres of Tennessee woods. That was my dream, my sanctuary, built on hard work and countless sacrifices. But looming just outside that peaceful vision, like a storm cloud on the horizon, was the ever-present shadow of my younger sister, Jessica. Jessica is. Well, she's Jessica. 3 years younger than me, and since birth, she's been the undisputed golden child of our family. Everything she did, every little milestone, every drawing, every whim, was met with rapturous applause from our parents, Douglas and Marianne. While I was celebrated for getting good grades or winning a scholarship, Jessica was celebrated for simply being. It was an unspoken rule, an ingrained family dynamic. Jessica was delicate. Jessica was brilliant. Jessica deserved the world, and everyone else's role was to help her get it. For the past 5 years, Jessica had been living what she dramatically called her nomadic entrepreneurial journey. This translated to moving from city to city. New York, LA, Miami, each stint punctuated by a new revolutionary business idea that inevitably crumbled, leaving behind a trail of unpaid debts and irate investors. A trendy, organic doggy daycare that only lasted 6 months. A wellness and spiritual coaching business that evaporated after a few disgruntled clients demanded refunds. My parents, however, never saw these as failures. Oh no, they were brave risks. Jessica was simply too visionary for the conventional world, too ahead of her time. Each time a business venture imploded, Jessica would inevitably crash back home. No job, dwindling savings, or, more accurately, burgeoning credit card debt, and always with a new sob story about how the world had conspired against her brilliance. And each time, like clockwork, Douglas and Marianne would open their arms, their wallets, and their endless well of sympathy. They'd bail her out, soothe her wounded ego, and fill her head with affirmations about her inevitable success. It was like watching a broken record, but they never seemed to notice the needle was stuck. Meanwhile, I was building my life, brick by brick, responsibly. I had a stable career, bought my own place, managed my finances, and even put a down payment on my dreamland. My stability, my independence, my careful planning, these weren't seen as strengths or accomplishments by my parents. Instead, they were labeled. My careful budgeting was cold. My focused ambition was selfish, because I wasn't dropping everything to cater to Jessica's latest drama. My quiet, consistent progress was boring, almost an indictment of Jessica's more erratic, passionate path. They'd often say things like, "Chloe, you're so good at taking care of yourself. Jessica just needs a bit more support." Or, "Chloe, you're so logical, you don't understand Jessica's artistic temperament." It was a constant, subtle undermining of my worth, contrasted with Jessica's elevated status. It never explicitly said it, but the message was clear. My stable life meant I didn't need their energy or resources, which were reserved for their perpetually struggling golden child. So when Jessica called them, tearfully admitting her latest venture, a bizarre cryptocurrency-based healing crystal startup, had gone bust, leaving her homeless and deeply in debt, I knew what was coming. It was the predictable cycle. She'd be back. She'd need a new solution. And my parents, in their endless quest to smooth Jessica's path, would inevitably look for the easiest, most convenient sacrifice. I just never imagined that sacrifice would be me, and more specifically, my 17 acres. Little did I know, the stage was already being set for the ultimate family drama, and I was about to be cast in the role I least expected, the unwilling provider for the golden child's next fresh start. The morning was perfect. Seriously, one of those idyllic Sunday mornings that feels tailor-made for family gatherings. The sun was warm, but not oppressive, filtering through the leaves of the old oak tree on our parents' back porch. Birds were chirping, a gentle breeze rustled the wind chimes, and the air was filled with the delicious smells of waffles, bacon, and freshly brewed coffee. I remember feeling a pleasant sense of peace, a rare feeling when it came to family events centered around Jessica's return. Jessica had been back for about a week by then, and the initial drama of her arrival, the tears, the "I've learned my lesson" speeches, the hushed phone conversations with our parents, had started to subside. She was temporarily holed up in her old room, presumably planning her next big thing. I had carefully maintained my distance, offering polite hellos but otherwise keeping to myself, hoping that by not engaging too much, I wouldn't get pulled into whatever new vortex she was creating. Our family tradition was Sunday brunch on the porch, a ritual I usually enjoyed. It was a chance to catch up, share a meal, and pretend for a few hours that we were a perfectly normal, functional family. I arrived, exchanged pleasantries, and poured myself a mimosa, the bubbles sparkling cheerfully in the glass. Mom, Marianne, was bustling around, ensuring everyone had enough food. Dad, Douglas, was holding court, telling some anecdote about a fishing trip. Jessica was unusually quiet, picking at her waffle, looking deceptively demure. Then the conversation shifted. Dad cleared his throat, a sound that always signaled something important was about to be said. He began by talking about Jessica's recent challenges and her resilience. My internal alarm bells started to softly chime. This was the preamble. "You know," he started, looking directly at me, his eyes a little too bright. "Jessica's been through a lot lately. She's really Lou. King for a fresh start. A place to put down roots, you know? Something solid." I nodded, cautiously. I knew what this meant. Another handout. Another rescue mission. I just hoped it wouldn't directly involve me. "And," he continued, a casual, almost offhand tone belying the sheer audacity of his next words, "we were thinking about your land, Chloe." My mimosa felt suddenly heavy in my hand. The birds chirping outside seemed to fade. Silence descended on the porch, thick and suffocating. "Your 17 acres, he pressed on, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "It's just sitting there, undeveloped. You haven't done anything with it, have you? Thought it might be a wonderful opportunity for Jessica to build something lasting. A real home base for her next venture." I blinked. Had I heard that correctly? Sign over my land? To Jessica? For a fresh start? My chest tightened, a cold dread seeping into my veins. Then Marianne chimed in, her voice dripping with syrupy sweetness, completely oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant, of the shock spreading across my face. "Oh yes, Chloe. We thought it would be such a beautiful act of sisterhood. You have so much, dear, and Jessica needs this. Imagine her there, building her dreams, a home. It would be just lovely." She clasped her hands together, radiating an aura of virtuous generosity. Jessica, from her end of the table, offered a small, watery smile, avoiding my gaze. It was a practiced look, one she deployed whenever she was being offered someone else's possessions. I was in shock, furious. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. My hard-earned sanctuary, my future, my quiet triumph, reduced to a casual suggestion, a commodity to be handed over for the golden child's next whim. It wasn't just a request. It was an expectation, delivered as if it were a generous offering I should be grateful to accept. The perfect Sunday brunch had just morphed into a nightmare. And the waffles, the eggs, the mimosas, they all tasted like betrayal. Silence after my father's outrageous suggestion felt like an eternity, but it was probably only a few seconds. My mind raced, trying to process the sheer audacity. My land? My land? The one thing I had worked so incredibly hard for, that symbolized my independence and future, to be gifted to Jessica like some kind of consolation prize for her latest failure? The thought was ludicrous, the idea was infuriating. No, I heard myself say, the word coming out even, steady, despite the hurricane raging inside me. Absolutely not, that land is mine, period. The fragile piece of the brunch shattered, my father's face contorted. A flush rising from his neck. Chloe, don't be difficult, he growled. His voice low and tight. This isn't up for debate, it's for Jessica, she needs it. Needs it? I practically scoffed. She's needed a new venture every 6 months for the past 5 years, and every single time, you two have swooped in to see, lean up the mess. This time, the mess would be my entire future, my life savings. This land isn't some toy I've outgrown, Dad. It's my dream. My refusal, calm as it was, seemed to trigger something explosive in him. His eyes narrowed, and he pushed back from the table, rising to his full height. Ungrateful! He practically roared, slamming his hand on the table, making the cutlery jump. After everything your mother and I have done for you? Every sacrifice? We put you through college. We drove you to countless swim practices. We raised you. You owe us. The accusation hung in the air, thick with resentment. It was the old familiar refrain, pulled out whenever I dared to assert my own desires over theirs, especially when those desires clashed with Jessica's needs. The implication was clear. My existence, my success, was somehow a debt I owed them, and now it was time to collect. Jessica, ever the opportunist, seized the moment. Her lower lip began to tremble, and her eyes welled up with theatrical tears. Chloe, how can you be so mean? She choked out, her voice barely a whisper. I just want a fresh start. A place to build something real. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, the perfect picture of a wounded victim. Then came Marianne, the master of emotional manipulation. She placed a hand over her heart, her voice soft but laced with heavy disappointment. Oh, Chloe, dear. Your father is right. We've given you everything. We supported you through all your choices, even when we didn't quite understand them. Your father worked so hard. I cooked every meal, made sure you had the best clothes. Isn't family supposed to help each other? What happened to the sweet, generous girl we raised? She conjured up decades of perceived support and sacrifice, weaponizing them against me, painting me as a heartless, selfish daughter. I stared at them, the reality of their worldview settling in with a sickening thud. They didn't see me. They never had. Not really. I wasn't Chloe, a person with her own dreams and autonomy. I was a resource. A stable, reliable resource meant to be leveraged for the family's comfort, particularly for Jessica's endless demands. My hard work, my financial independence, wasn't something to be proud of. It was a conveniently available asset to be deployed as they saw fit. The waffles, the mimosas, the sunny morning, it all turned to ash in my mouth. I couldn't breathe in that stifling air, choked by their accusations and their twisted logic. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs, but it wasn't just anger. It was a profound, aching sorrow. A sorrow for the family I thought I had, for the love I always believed was unconditional. I stood up, pushing my chair back with a scrape that seemed deafening in the sudden tension. I didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say. I just walked away, leaving the half-eaten brunch, the broken promises, and the shattered illusion of family harmony behind me. I walked out of that perfect Sunday morning, heartbroken, shaken, but with a terrifying clarity. This wasn't just a disagreement. This was a declaration. And it was far from overdone. After that disastrous brunch, I tried to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, my refusal had been strong enough. That my parents, despite their warped sense of entitlement, would back down. I thought that perhaps the sheer shock of my defiance would make them reconsider. I spent the next few days in a state of anxious limbo, waiting for an apology, or at least some acknowledgement of how out of line they had been. The phone remained silent. No angry calls, no guilt-tripping texts from Mom. Not even a whiny update from Jessica. I foolishly hoped that the silence meant the storm had passed, that they had accepted no as an answer. How naive I was. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a few weeks after the brunch, and I was at work, deep in a complex spreadsheet, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mrs. Whitney, my wise and fiery neighbor who lived a few miles down the road from my land. We'd bonded over our shared love for the rural quiet and our slightly eccentric tendencies. Her text was short and to the point. Chloe, some strangers are on your land. Look like surveyors. You expecting them? My blood ran cold. Surveyors? No, absolutely not. I hadn't hired anyone. I hadn't authorized anything. A jolt of pure adrenaline shot through me. My mind immediately flashed back to that horrific brunch. Had they? Could they really be that brazen? I mumbled an excuse to my boss and raced out of the office, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The drive felt interminable. Each mile that passed brought a fresh wave of dread. When I finally pulled up to the edge of my property, a white truck with precision surveying emblazoned on the side was parked near my property marker. Two men in neon vests were walking the perimeter, holding their equipment, oblivious to the sick feeling churning in my stomach. I approached them, trying to keep my voice even, though it trembled slightly. "Excuse me," I said. "Can I help you?" "This is private property." One of the men looked up, surprised. "Oh, sorry, ma'am. We're just surveying for a new client, Douglas Miller. He's putting it on the market," said he wanted the boundaries clearly marked. Douglas Miller. My father. My jaw dropped. On the market? My land? My stomach plummeted. I felt a wave of nausea followed by a searing, white-hot anger. He wasn't just dismissing my refusal. He was actively, deliberately circumventing it. He was trying to sell my land. I managed to stammer out that he had no right, that the land was mine, showing them the property deed information on my phone. The surveyors, looking confused and uncomfortable, quickly packed up their equipment, apologized, and left. They had been duped, just as I was being targeted. The moment they were gone, I drove straight to the county office. I marched up to the property rec. Board's desk, my hands clammy, my voice tight with barely suppressed fury. "I need to view the deed for parcel number." I recited the number from memory. The clerk, a kindly older woman, looked it up. "Ah, yes, Chloe Miller." "Still in your name," she confirmed, giving me a moment of immense relief. But then her brow furrowed. "Though it shows a pending ownership transfer request. Seems like there's some paperwork in review for a transfer to a Jessica Miller?" The words hit me like a physical blow. A pending ownership transfer to Jessica. My own father had forged documents claiming I planned to sell, or perhaps attempting to use some old, expired power of attorney forms he'd likely pressured me into signing years ago. It didn't matter how he was doing it. He was doing it. He was trying to steal my land. Suddenly, the silence of the past few weeks wasn't naive hope. It was strategic. It was the calm before the storm, allowing him to work in the shadows. He wasn't backing down. He was escalating. This wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. This was a direct, calculated attack. My father, the man who was supposed to be my protector, was actively trying to illegally claim my life's dream in his other daughter's name. The initial heartbreak from the brunch curdled into something cold and hard. This was no longer just about hurt feelings or family drama. This was about outright theft, about a complete disregard for my rights, my autonomy, my very personhood. The game had changed. The line had been crossed. And in that moment, standing in the sterile county office, seeing the evidence of his betrayal laid out before me, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. War had been declared. And I was ready to fight. That teaching moment I left the county office after seeing that pending ownership transfer, I knew I couldn't fight this alone. My father wasn't backing down. He was showing me, in no uncertain terms, that he would stop at nothing to take what was mine. This wasn't some petty family squabble anymore. This was a legal battle, and I was completely out of my depth. My first thought was, now what? I'd never had to hire a lawyer before. My life was supposed to be stable, organized, free of this kind of conflict. But there I was, facing the prospect of losing the one thing I had truly built for myself. So I took a deep breath, and I started researching real estate law, property disputes, forgery. The words themselves felt heavy and terrifying. I interviewed a few attorneys. Some sounded too aggressive, some too meek. But then I found Liam Roberts. He was younger than I expected, probably in his early 30s, but his reputation preceded him. He had a calm, tactical demeanor, and he listened, really listened, to my story, nodding occasionally, making notes. When I finished, he didn't sugarcoat anything. "This is going to be difficult, Chloe," he told me, leaning back in his chair. "Family disputes are often the nastiest, and when you add real estate, fraud, it gets complicated. It's also going to be expensive. Very expensive." My heart sank. My land fund was for the land, not fighting for it. I had my mortgage, my car payment, and my student loans. Money was tight, always. But how could I put a price on my freedom? On my future? "What do I need to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Liam outlined the immediate steps. We had to send cease and desist letters directly to my parents, informing them that any further attempts to interfere with my property would result in legal action. We would file a petition with the court to prevent the illegal transfer and put a restraining order on the property, making sure no one could touch it. He also warned me this would escalate things even further. There would be no turning back. To cover the initial retainers and projected legal fees, I had to make a gut-wrenching decision. I put my mortgage up for collateral, along with my car. It was terrifying, a massive risk. If I lost, I could lose everything. But I looked at Liam, at the detailed plan he laid out, and I looked inside myself at the anger, the hurt, and the fierce determination to protect my sanctuary. I had come too far to give up now. As expected, the moment the legal letters hit my parents, the rumor mill started spinning. Douglas and Marianne went into overdrive, painting me as the villain. They told anyone who would listen that I was unstable, ungrateful, mentally unwell, and that I was destroying the family over nothing. Jessica, of course, was the poor victim, desperately trying to get back on her feet, only to be cruelly thwarted by her cold, selfish sister. The small town we lived near, where my family had deep roots, suddenly felt suffocating. Acquaintances would give me strange looks in the grocery store. Friends of my parents would cross the street to avoid me. My own extended family called, not to offer support, but to reason with me, to try and convince me to just give in for the sake of peace. It felt like I was being isolated, pushed to the brink. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, curled up in my apartment, wondering if it was all worth it. The emotional toll was immense. The financial strain was constant. Was this fight really worth losing my family, my reputation, potentially even more of my financial security? Was the land, however precious, worth this much pain? Then I'd remember the look on my father's face, the casual dismissal of my dreams, the sheer arrogance of their attempt to take what was mine. I'd remember the quiet promise I'd made to myself on those acres, the promise of a future built on my own terms. And the anger, the determination would surge back. I had to fight, not just for the land, but for myself, for the truth, for the principle that what I earned, what I built, was mine, and no one, not even my family, had the right to simply take it. Liam's steady voice would echo in my head. Or lose it all. The choice was stark, and I knew what I had to do. Each legal process was glacial. Weeks turned into months, filled with endless paperwork, phone calls with Liam, and the constant stress of my family's smear campaign in town. I was exhausted, financially strapped, and emotionally drained. I visited my land often, finding solace in its quiet solitude, trying to visualize the future I was fighting so hard to preserve. The restraining order Liam had filed was supposed to protect it, to ensure no one touched it until the court made its decision. I thought, for a brief reprieve, that my land was finally safe. Then, one night, around midnight, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Whitney, my neighbor. Her voice was sharp, laced with alarm. "Chloe, you need to get out here. Now. There's a bulldozer on your property. And they're cutting down trees." My heart seized in my chest. A bulldozer? Cutting trees? It was impossible. The restraining order. Had they really gone that far? I threw on clothes, grabbed my keys, and sped out of my apartment, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The drive felt agonizingly long, every turn of the wheel agony. As I approached my land, I saw it, the harsh gleam of industrial lights cutting through the darkness of the woods. The sickening roar of heavy machinery punctuated the night. Smoke curled into the air. I pulled over abruptly and jumped out of my car, racing towards the sound. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just a bulldozer. There were several pieces of heavy construction equipment. And the trees. Oh God, the trees. Massive, ancient oaks and maples, some of them centuries old, lay mangled on the ground, their branches splintered, their roots torn from the earth. A raw, gaping wound stretched across my property where dense forest had once stood. In the harsh glare of the work lights, I saw them. Douglas. My father. He was standing with a burly man in a hard hat, pointing, gesturing. He was directing the destruction. He looked entirely too pleased with himself. Just beyond them, I could see surveyor's markings for what looked like the foundation of a cabin, drawn right through the heart of where I envisioned my tiny home. A primal scream tore through me. Stop, IT, what are you doing? Douglas whipped his head around, his face illuminated by the harsh lights. He looked shocked for a split second, surprised to see me, then his expression hardened into one of cold contempt. Chloe, he said, his voice laced with a condescending sneer. What are you doing out here? Protecting your precious land? You're too late. Jessica needs a home, and this is where it's going to be. Fury, cold and absolute, washed over me. Too late? There's a court order, Dad. A restraining order. You can't do this. This is my land. I gestured wildly at the fallen giants, the desecrated ground. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut wood and diesel. He laughed. A harsh, humorless sound that sent shivers down my spine. Court order? Please. I'm just making arrangements for my daughter. Unlike you, she actually needs a place to live, a place to build a future. You're just sitting on this, hoarding it. I told you, this is for family. The contractor, a burly man with a scowl, stepped forward. Look, lady, your dad here hired me. Says he owns the place. Showed me the papers. We got a job to do. He doesn't own it. I shrieked, tears of rage and desperation streaming down my face. He lied. He forged documents. It's mine. My father stepped in front of the contractor, blocking him from me, his eyes blazing with a terrifying intensity. He pointed a finger at me, trembling with rage. You are nothing, Chloe. You are nothing without us. You think you're so independent, so strong, building your own life? Look at you. All alone. Jessica deserves this more than you ever could. She needs it. You're just cold, selfish, an ungrateful daughter. He wasn't just screaming. He was performing, making sure the contractor, and probably Mrs. Whitney, who I now saw standing behind her car, could hear every word. His words cut deeper than any blade, but they also fueled a fire inside me. I was shaking, consumed by a raw, unfiltered fury I hadn't known I possessed. This wasn't merely about the land anymore. This was a battle for my very identity, my sanity, my right to exist as an individual separate from their manipulative grasp. He wasn't just destroying trees. He was trying to destroy me. And in that moment, I swore he wouldn't win. The day of the courtroom showdown arrived, a culmination of months of stress, fear, and defiant resolve. The local courthouse, usually quiet and somewhat dusty, buzzed with an unusual tension. It felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a public execution, with me as the condemned. My heart hammered against my ribs, but Liam's steady presence beside me, along with the comforting hand of Mrs. Whitney on my arm, gave me a sliver of strength. When my family walked in, a collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Douglas looked stern and self-righteous, Marianne prim and sorrowful, and Jessica. Jessica looked like a delicate flower, wilting under the harsh glare of observation. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, playing the victim perfectly. The familial battlefield was set. The prosecution, representing my parents' fraudulent claim, began their case. They painted a picture of a loving family trying to help their struggling daughter, Jessica, and me, Chloe, as an unfeeling, opportunistic sibling who had supposedly reneged on a vague promise of the land. Jessica was called to testify first. She swore on the Bible, her voice tremulous. She recounted how I had supposedly, casually mentioned years ago that if she ever really needed a place to get back on her feet, I'd help her out with the land. She twisted my words, transforming a general statement of sisterly support into a concrete, unequivocal promise of property. She used words like betrayed, abandoned, and left without options, emphasizing her current homelessness and dire financial straits. Her performance was convincing to anyone who didn't know her history. The tears flowed freely, her voice cracked with emotion, and she ended her testimony with a look of wounded innocence directed straight at me. Then it was Liam's turn. He approached the stand with a calm confidence that steadied my nerves. He began by presenting my deed, unequivocally showing my sole ownership of the land. He then presented the evidence of the surveyors on my property, who confirmed having been hired by Douglas Miller, a man who had no legal right to hire them. He presented a copy of the restraining order I had taken out against Douglas, which explicitly forbade any work on the property. Next, Liam meticulously dismantled the forgery attempts. He brought in an expert in document analysis who testified that the signatures on the pending ownership transfer papers, allegedly mine, were indeed forged. This was the bombshell moment. He then focused on the power of attorney document my father supposedly used to authorize such a transfer. Liam revealed that this particular document, an old one from when I was 19 and recovering from a surgery, had long since expired and was legally void. Douglas had intentionally misrepresented its validity, attempting to leverage an obsolete legal instrument for his scheme. Liam then presented my evidence. Emails between me and Jessica, clearly showing her repeated requests for money, not land, and my consistent refusals to bail her out financially. Recordings of calls where my parents tried to pressure me into helping Jessica out. Recordings I'd started discreetly making after the brunch, a grim premonition guiding me. There was even a recording of my father's enraged outburst from the night of the bulldozer incident, where he explicitly stated his belief that I owed them, and Jessica deserved it more, because she needed it. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. The judge, initially impassive, began to look increasingly severe. Douglas and Marianne looked shocked, then furious, as their carefully constructed narrative crumbled. Jessica's theatrical tears dried up, her face paling. Finally, the judge delivered the verdict. Unequivocal. Unambiguous. Chloe Miller retained full and complete custody of her 17 acres of land. The attempted transfer was declared null and void. Douglas Miller was found to be in contempt of court for violating the restraining order and was heavily fined for property destruction and attempted fraud. To protect me from further harassment, a permanent protective order was put in place, legally mandating that Douglas and Marianne Miller and Jessica Miller could not contact me or come within a specified distance of my home or property. The gavel struck, echoing through the stunned courtroom. It was over. I had won. But the victory felt bittersweet. I had my land, but the cost had been the destruction of M. Why family. Winning in court was a victory, undeniably. But it wasn't the triumphant, joyous moment you see in movies. There was no cheering, no embrace, just the heavy silence of a family irrevocably broken. The protective order meant I had legal distance from them, but it simultaneously cemented the emotional chasm that had opened between us. The fallout was immediate and intense, my parents choosing anger over any semblance of introspection or regret, when completely no contact. Not that I expected anything less. After all, I had dared to stand up for myself to expose their manipulations in a public forum. In their eyes, I was the villain who had destroyed the family, not the one who defended her own property against their illegal schemes. The final communication I received from my father, Douglas, came in the form of a voicemail. His voice, usually so controlled, was strained with a volatile mix of fury and pain. "You're dead to us, Chloe," he spat into the phone. "You hear me? Dead. We have no daughter named Chloe anymore. You chose dirt over family, and you'll regret it." The words hit me hard, but in a strange way, they also brought a perverse sense of finality. It was over. The charade was done. Jessica, predictably, took to social media. She spun a dramatic, tearful narrative for her followers, painting herself as the innocent victim of my cold-hearted selfishness. She claimed I had left her homeless and ruined her life, conveniently omitting any mention of her financial mismanagement, her failed ventures, or the attempted land grab. Her post generated a wave of sympathy from her online audience and a few pointed, nasty comments from people in town who still believed my parents' version of events. I tried to ignore it, to focus on the future. The period immediately following the court case was one of immense emotional and financial strain. Despite the judgment, the legal fees had depleted my savings. I was still responsible for the mortgage collateral I'd put up. The emotional energy expended in the fight had left me utterly drained. But amidst the chaos, a strange sense of peace began to emerge. With the legal battle over and my family out of my life, the constant pressure, the subtle manipulations, the need to constantly prove my worth were gone. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living under their shadow, trying to meet their impossible standards or anticipate Jessica's latest crisis. I started spending every spare moment on my land. Liam had ensured that Douglas was responsible for the damages, but the trees were gone, and the marked-up ground remained. It was a raw wound, a constant reminder of the betrayal. But I decided to transform it. I started by hand-clearing the debris, one fallen branch at a time. It was grueling, solitary work, but it was cathartic. With each piece of wood I moved, each patch of disturbed earth I smoothed, it felt like I was reclaiming not just the land, but myself. I began building a tiny house, largely by myself. I researched, watched endless YouTube tutorials, and learned new skills. My hands were constantly bruised, my muscles ached. But for the first time, the pain felt productive, purposeful. Neighbor Mrs. Whitney would occasionally stop by with a thermos of coffee or a freshly baked pie, offering quiet words of encouragement. Her unwavering belief in me was a lifeline. Building that house, hammer by hammer, nail by nail, was more than just construction. It was a process of healing. Every beam I put into place, every wall I raised, felt like a silent, defiant act of reclaiming my narrative. It was grueling, yes, but it was also incredibly empowering. I was literally building my own sanctuary, brick by brick, foundation by foundation. And with each step, the emotional wounds began to slowly, painstakingly, scab over. The flames of betrayal had burned, yes, but from the ashes, something new, something stronger was rising. My land, my life, my rules. 18 months. That's how long it's been since the court date, since the gavel fell and sealed my family's fate and mine. 18 months since I last spoke to my parents, since I laid eyes on Jessica. The wounds from that battle ran deep, but time and honest effort have a way of healing even the most profound of hurts. Today, I stand on the porch of my very own house, built with my own hands, on my own land. It's not a mansion, not even a traditional home. It's a tiny house, nestled perfectly into the clearing I painstakingly created. The woods around me, though scarred in places by my father's destructive attempt, are slowly reclaiming their peace. The trees that remain whisper tales of resilience, their leaves rustling a tranquil melody that soothes my soul. This truly is my sanctuary, every nail, every plank, a testament to my perseverance. I built this largely by myself. There were days I wanted to give up, when my hands ached, my back protested, and my mind was clouded with memories of the past. But then I'd look at the rising walls, at the quiet beauty of the land, and remember why I was fighting. Not just for property, but for self-worth, for autonomy, for the right to chart my own course. Mrs. Whitney, a true guardian angel, stopped by frequently, not just with food, but with wisdom and unwavering belief. She showed me what true, selfless support looked like. I haven't spoken to my parents in over a year. There are no more phone calls, no awkward holiday gatherings. My father's final voicemail, the one declaring me dead to us, still echoes sometimes, but it no longer holds the power to wound me. It simply serves as another reminder of the chasm that proved too wide to bridge. I've heard snippets about Jessica online, still attempting various entrepreneurial endeavors, still blaming others for her misfortunes. My protective order has ensured that their drama remains squarely out of my life, a relief I didn't even realize I craved until I had it. For the first time in my life, I feel truly free. Not just financially independent or professionally successful, but emotionally free. Free from the constant need for validation. Free from the burdensome weight of favoritism. Free from the obligation to be anything other than who I am. The control they exerted, subtle and insidious, is gone. The constant comparisons, the guilt trips, the subtle undermining, all of it has faded into background noise, overshadowed by the quiet strength I found within myself. This land, my land, is more than just acres and trees. It represents a different kind of victory. It's the triumph of self-preservation, of drawing firm boundaries, of refusing to be a pawn in someone else's game. It's proof that sometimes the most profound acts of defiance are not loud or angry, but silent, determined, and built brick by painstaking brick. It's living a life on my terms, setting my rules, and creating a future that no one can steal. Some people might call what I did revenge. And maybe, in a way, it is. But it's not the kind of revenge that seeks to inflict pain. It's the kind that heals, that builds, that blossoms. It's the silent, victorious revenge of self-authorship, built on foundations that, this time, are truly unshakable. Would you have given up the land or fought back like I did? Let's talk about it in the comments below. And if you want more stories that pierce the heart and ignite your spirit, stories of truth, resilience, and finding your own way, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned. My next story? Even I didn't see it coming.